just take less than a minute of context before we jump into the content. Oncology, the growth rate of oncology in India is skyrocketing. Numbers are hard to come by, but what I could find was a diagnosed incidence of 3.5 million cases in India in 2020. Assuming a diagnosis rate of about 50%, which is sort of what's reported, that means a disease burden of 6 million people. And what's scary is that number is projected to grow 2x in terms of incidence and 3x in terms of diagnosis by 2030. So we're really talking about very, very large numbers here. I think the objective of this panel is not to dwell upon why that is happening. I think it's more to dwell upon what we can do about it, right? And I'm really happy to have a set of speakers who can touch upon this from a few different areas. With that preamble out of the way, let's just sort of jump into the discussion. And the first area I just want to spend a few minutes on is just discussing oncology as a single specialty. Sridhar, maybe I can put you on the spot for this one. But, just talk to us about why is oncology being seen as ripe for single specialty care? And is this coming from the need of the patient? Is it coming from the need of the provider? And with these rapid sort of growths in volume you're seeing, tell us some underlying trends. What's really happening that's driving this massive increase in sort of diagnosis?
Thank you, Ashish. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to the co-panelists and good afternoon to the audience. I've been working in the single specialty space of oncology from 2002. So 24 years associated with two largest groups in oncology from Hyderabad. One is Basatarakam Cancer Hospital, which is a 600-bedded cancer center with 6 Linacs, PET-CT, cyclotron, and name all the technologies under one roof. I was founder CEO of Omega Hospitals, which is today's second largest oncology chain in India. Again, a specialty onco chain. And then I founded Renova 3 years back in 2021. And right now we have 4 single specialty centers in Hyderabad, one in Jaipur, Allahabad is under construction, and a lot of other centers. So I can just give you a gist of my experience in terms of why single specialty worked. Because all these centers have been highly successful, turned around very quickly, and high EBITDA positive centers. The reasons are 3-4. The first 2 main reasons, the main 2 stakeholders of any healthcare business, whether it is oncology or multi-specialty or any other business, patients and doctors. So if you look at from the angle of these 2 stakeholders and coming to patients, oncology still is a very threatening disease in the mind of common public. So once somebody is diagnosed with cancer, unlike other specialties where they would go to those specialties based on the brand name or the proximity to where they stay, in oncology specifically, they look for doctors and they look for the consultants who are treating them, and that is where they feel more safe and more secure. When they know that a particular brand is in catering only in oncology, because once a patient in oncology is a patient forever. Mostly they come at second, third stage, and the recurrence comes after 2 years. So they become a family with the consultant and with the hospital. So therefore, from the patient's perspective, single specialties onco centers gives that extra comfort, security, and confidence. So therefore, it becomes more easy to attract patients when you run a single specialty onco center. Coming to doctors, I think now oncologists are the stars in healthcare. And in oncology, again, oncology is like 3-4 departments. So it's like a multi-specialty in itself. You have surgical oncology, medical oncology, radiation oncology, nuclear medicine. Now so many new therapies coming in. So when they become part of a multi-specialty, they feel they get lost in already established star departments like cardiology, neurosurgery, which have been the leading departments for so long. But today oncologists know that they are the stars of future, and they need that extra presence or extra visibility in terms of their own career or their own future. So therefore, oncologists are also very much interested to join brands which focus specifically as a single specialty. So these are the 2 reasons mainly why if you see historically, even not just in India, but even in West and other places, specialty space is something which has been very successful oncology, along with mother and child and IVF.
Got it. And that's very helpful, Sridhar. So there is at one level a patient affinity for sort of being associated with the center of excellence, and the second is really the clinician preference. And if I could just touch upon, how that model might evolve even as we look ahead, and maybe I've given 6 minutes to Dr. Bashish to catch his breath, so maybe I can ping this to you. But
more than enough time.
the recent trend we're seeing, and you are of course at the forefront of it. You run India's largest chain of daycare chemotherapy centers, but more broadly, we're seeing oncology further unbundling, right? And we're seeing the rise of chemotherapy-focused clinics. We're seeing the rise of surgical oncology-focused setups. Could you talk about, why is this happening? And also, Dr. Bashish, maybe if you could dwell upon one other aspect as to, how do you manage patient escalations? And are patients asking for this, or is this driven by sort of clinician preferences?
So, very well questioned, Ashish, and I think agree with what Dr. Sridhar mentioned. I think for a minute, let's zoom out and have a bird's eye view of healthcare in general in India, right? About 10, 20 years where the entire healthcare industry was largely occupied with infectious and communicable diseases. Out of every 10 new drugs which came in the 90s, 8 of them were antibiotics, antivirals, anti-infectives. In the last decade, we are assuming to some extent, though, that the infection rate control has significantly improved. The overall hygiene of the country has improved. We do not see as many infectious deaths as we would. We do not see as many malarial deaths as we would a decade back. So the focus is now shifted to more chronic illnesses, diabetes, cardiovascular, oncology being one of them. Now, what actually sets oncology apart from cardiovascular is, for example, if you have a chest pain and you go to a cardiologist for a revascularization procedure, it could be an angiography or an angioplasty or a coronary bypass, you're unlikely to visit your cardiologist again every few weeks. You will undergo a successful coronary revascularization. Your cardiologist will give you a prescription. You see him again in 4 weeks and then probably once in 6 months. That's not what happens in oncology, as Dr. Sridhar alluded to. You'll probably see him every week, every 3 weeks, till the time whether you remain cured or you recur or the disease goes into remission or you die. So oncology is a very different subspecialty in terms of the quantum of the healthcare effort that is required from both the ends. So it certainly is far more engrossing as a subspecialty, both from healthcare needs and from the patient needs, hence probably deserving enough attention to stay out of the hospital. Having said that, again, all parts of oncology cannot be out of the hospital. For a radiation oncology facility, yes, there are a few standalone centers, but majority of them are a part of a large multi-speciality center or a comprehensive cancer care center. One part of oncology which I believe is better served outside is medical oncology. Rationale being that it's an easy ingress, easy egress. It's repetitive in nature. You could undergo surgery once in your lifetime. You may need 12 sessions of chemotherapy. You certainly would not walk into the same large infrastructure, go through the same hospitalization admission process for a predefined, preset therapy. So that was the unmet need, honestly, we looked at when we were creating MOC. Also, very honestly, Ashish, it's not just about the large corporate hospitals and the large government hospitals, where the patient pools are. And one fails to understand the depth of this problem, that 60% of the oncology work, even in India today, is not catered by large corporate hospitals or large government hospitals. It is still in those, dare I say the word, dingy, unorganized, small nursing homes. I use the word dingy because they do not probably profess a certain level of quality care or an NABH accreditation or a standard which is required for delivering that care. And that's born out of a desperation rather than a wisdom, right? I cannot be walking into a large Apollo or, a Tata Memorial Hospital every time that I need chemotherapy. So I would walk into one of these hospitals, get a predefined protocol, and hope and assume that my local care provider will be enough educated to take care of my needs. So it was this large unorganized sector of people who are outside a Tata Memorial, not able to afford an Apollo, which required care, and which is where we came up with these concepts of creating centers of excellence which were very, very small, very tightly controlled in terms of homogenization of process and control. Medical oncology forms 55% of the entire business of oncology in terms of the volume of the entire business, right? And it's again repetitive, reasonably predictive in terms of outcome, and probably the only part which can be process driven and to some extent is not as dependent on the need of a star surgeon or the need of a phenomenally good cyberknife machine. So if you can protocolize, homogenize, you can probably improve patient outcomes. So that was the basic ethos of creating standalone. Please, of course.
How do you deal with escalations?
Escalations of care.
Escalations of care, yeah.
So again, there is a protocol for absolutely every known, unknown emergency, right? Like it is, what if this patient was in a large hospital and has an acute reaction to chemotherapy? He would ring a bell, somebody from the ER or from the emergency team would come and address it. He will be shifted to the ICU. Versus, what if you can create a semi-ICU in the same 5,000 square feet of infrastructure? We've had a randomized analysis, if I can say so, where we've shown that the turnaround time for managing an acute emergency is far, far lesser in a smaller, tightly controlled infrastructure. And 95% of all the emergencies are managed within 2 to 3 minutes of them happening. When it comes to rarest of the rare emergencies in terms of an acute myocardial event and the patient needs to be shifted to a higher organization or an institute, so every center has a predefined protocol of how to take this patient to a particular institute in a predefined geography. So there is a protocol for end-to-end care which is provided and explained to every patient before the initiation of therapy. And what happens? No, we often invest into creating 99% of infrastructure for 1% needs, right? So can we actually find a needle in the haystack and realize that this problem is a 1% problem and it can be defined in a predefined protocolized way, rather than creating a huge ivory tower for a process which does not need so.
So a common theme seems to be high touch, extended period of time with the patient. And B, you're saying that there is fit for purpose infrastructure sort of outside the existing multi-specialty. And you touched upon an interesting point, Sridhar, maybe I can bounce this back to you. The comprehensive care centers, right, I think is sort of the traditional standard approach, right, for dealing with oncology. 70% of it or more in India is private sector investment. And just given sort of the volumes we're seeing, that's where more financial investment needs to go in. And just being a numbers person, the investment required in radiation infrastructure is quite frightening. You try to do this in an asset-light model. Just talk about what are options available to operators or investors to think about comprehensive care in a capital efficient manner.
Yeah, I think there are two things to this. And if you are trying to establish a cancer center in a district or in a city where the supply is absolutely zero or probably very less, and the demand is high, then we can straight away go for a complete standalone comprehensive center where we take a building on lease, do the infrastructure, learn infrastructure related finishes, and then bring equipment in. All this will cost, say, for example, 100 bedded will cost us about 70-75 CR. But if you are going into cities or towns where there are some facilities and there is good enough competition, but still there is a little bit of space available in terms of supply and demand, then the model we chose is being hospital in hospital, because there are a lot of good multi-specialities. For example, we have done it in Jaipur in a beautiful multi-speciality of 500 bedded. They didn't have oncology because few multi-speciality players feel oncology is a completely different ballgame, so they don't prefer to invest in oncology, but they have very good multi-speciality patient base. So that is where we go in to these kind of centers where infrastructure is completely supported by them, and we invest only in 2 equipment or 3 equipment, mainly LINAC, PET-CT and mammography. So that's where we almost reduce the investment to 40-45%, and therefore the numbers work out there.
Got it. No, very helpful. And maybe let me sort of jump into the second theme I was keen to get a perspective on, and zooming out, Harriet, I'd love to get your take on this. You, of course, co-lead McKinsey's Cancer Center and the work that you do in R&D operating models. Oncology is 40% of the global clinical development pipeline. Tell us, the world has moved from small molecule to large molecule. What is next?
Thanks, Ashish. No, look, it's a super exciting space to be involved in. Maybe I touch on 3 or 4 different things that we're excited about. So the first would be around novel modalities. As you yourself allude to, we've gone from small molecule cytotoxic chemotherapy to seeing more large molecule therapy. And we increasingly see a diversity of what I group as novel modalities, though each of them is distinct in its own way. So maybe to start with those closest to our monoclonal antibodies, we see ADCs. So Enhertu has transformed the care of many patients with breast cancer and has shown the potential of ADCs to be used across a broader set of patients. And we have now seen 14 different approved ADCs across solid particularly, and also some heme indications. So those have a real potential for patients. Similarly, the bispecifics, and that is a space which has really accelerated. We now have, in the US, 9 different bispecifics approved, and 6 of those have been since 2022. And again, delivering impressive efficacy and outcomes for patients. Beyond that, if we look more broadly, the CAR T space and the cell therapy space remains exciting. We have multiple CAR Ts approved and profitable, which took a minute. But beyond that also, can we take cell therapy to solid indications? We saw TILs approved, so the first effective cell therapy in solid indications this year. And research continues in allogeneic cell therapy. An off-the-shelf cell therapy treatment, particularly one that was durable, would be a game changer across indications. And then Moderna and Merck have published more data around mRNA vaccines. So a question on what we see there. These kind of tap into the precision medicine theme, one which is not a new theme, but it's continuing to accelerate. We now have over 100 different biomarker-defined therapies approved, and that's increased from about 65 years ago. So it's not a new theme, but it's continuing to increase. And across a wide range of biomarkers, there are nearly 90 different biomarkers in that mix. So we are seeing, not for every patient and not for every indication, but continued investment in therapies that are highly effective. But then if I just jump to the other side of it, the other thing which I'm excited about is the growing use of neoadjuvant therapies. So changing an old paradigm where an early stage 1, stage 2 patient is resected and then sent on their way, or potentially given some chemotherapy, to using some of these highly effective therapies either before or post-surgery to reduce recurrence rates and achieve overall outcomes. And this, if you can increase the proportion of patients with cancer who receive a curative outcome, that's game-changing. And we see, again, not every indication, but lung cancer, melanoma, fairly well established. The CDK4/6s in breast cancer increasingly widely used. And then again, more data this year in colorectal cancer. So really a paradigm where you can use these highly effective targeted therapies earlier in patients' journey. And maybe the last one I'll just touch on, liquid biopsy. That is the other place I am excited. We're seeing liquid biopsies used currently mostly for treatment selection and monitoring. So minimal residual disease and Guardant well used in terms of therapy selection. But what for me would be a game changer is if we can get screening liquid biopsies to the point where they're cost effective, such that we can identify patients before they have symptoms and we can achieve curative outcomes for more patients. So that's my kind of longer term view, maybe.
No, that's actually helpful. And Harry, just give us a sense of when you talk about, changing the game in terms of treatment, either in terms of precision medicine or new modalities, how big an impact are you seeing versus standard of care? I mean, what is it that, are we seeing some of these actually lead to complete remissions? Just talk about sort of what's the impact you're actually seeing from some of the newer modalities?
So on the modalities point, we see in terms of some of the highly effective CAR T bispecifics in the heme malignancies, 80-90% response rates, and those can be deep responses. Now, those don't come without side effect profiles, but we have the ability to deliver curative outcomes. The first patients who got CD19 CAR Ts are a decade plus out and are doing well. So these are patients who were out of options. Transformative. And if we look at Enhertu, so this is a HER2 ADC. So patients for years have been treated with Herceptin or Perjeta and were doing well. But the survival rate of those patients who get Enhertu has been additional months, if not years. And we have now seen this can expand not just to patients who were considered HER2 positive historically, but have HER2 low or HER2 ultra low. So patients we would have traditionally seen as maybe triple negative patients now have targeted therapies as options. And if you can take someone who was going to relapse and cure them early on, I mean, that is years and years of additional life if you can look at the reduced recurrence rate.
Got it. No, very helpful. And, sort of staying with this theme of emerging therapies, maybe Dr. Vashisht, if I can also get your take on, which of these do you see as being more highly relevant to the Indian market? And maybe the second part of the question is, Harriet touched upon precision diagnostics. Would love to get your take on, from an India perspective, what are you seeing? Do you see sort of, accelerating adoption? Are you neutral on it? Would just love to get your sense on the relevance of the global sort of treatment paradigm to India.
So Ashish, I mean, it's extremely an exciting time for an oncologist when we see an advanced cancer patient as well. I think largely oncology in general, from a death sentence, has now become a chronic illness. It's not uncommon to see a stage 4 kidney cancer, melanoma, lung cancer patient survive for years, maybe even decades. Things that we did not think of in the past. Why do you see so many cancer patients? Because the incidence is definitely not decreasing, but the prevalence is increasing. You have so many chronic cancer patients who are still alive. And hence, you're very likely to bump into a cancer survivor in whichever part of the world or the country that you are in. Point number 2, specifically to India, India is a very heterogeneous market. India has the affordability of the Emiratis of the Middle East to a swath of population which may be not having the access that even a sub-Saharan country has. So, it's a very, very heterogeneous ecosystem that we deal with. Yes, we do liquid biopsies, we do MRD monitorings, we do ADCs very, very often. And I believe that process will continue. So there's a certain aspirational value attached to so many cancers now. And it's not, I mean, I'm reiterating, it's not uncommon to see metastatic cancers live significantly longer. And it's not that we do not use these therapies often. Are they for all comers? The answer is probably not yet. But for the affording, for the people who have exposure to that kind of either financial access or access to the right amount of healthcare insurance, these drugs are all available. In fact, the time that it would take for a drug to be launched in the US to be launched in India about 6 years back was an average 3 years. Now it's about 4 months. The moment an ADC is launched in the West, in about 100 to 120 days, if there is a market for it, the company would launch in India. Yes, there are certain indications that it would not come because the incidence of certain cancers is uncommon in the country. But largely, when you have these blockbuster drugs like the Enhertus of the world, the BiTEs of the world, the ADCs of the world, very much there and on the horizon and about to be launched in India if they already haven't been.
And your take, Dr. Vashisht, on, beyond price, any other meaningful barriers that, collectively the ecosystem needs to overcome for more widespread adoption?
I think both. One is the price and second is the infrastructure to deliver care. Right? I could be sitting in Nanded, which is a tier 3 town in Bombay, in Maharashtra. I could be having all the riches. But if there is no dedicated healthcare infrastructure which can deliver that care, and hence we need a hybrid, right? We need the CCCs of the world. We also need these bespoke cancer solutions which can enter the bylanes of the community and try and deliver the same ADC. For example, can an ADC be delivered in a small 1,000 square feet daycare center in Nanded? Yes, it can be, with very good outcome and the same amount of monitoring that we would probably do for a patient sitting near Breach Candy Hospital. So it's about creating infrastructure to be able to ensure that they get that care, and B, it's about having access to these drugs in terms of the pricing.
Got it. And so this almost links the proliferation of new modalities and treatments and diagnostics to the first point around oncology as a single specialty and ramping up the coverage of the infrastructure. Very helpful. And sort of staying on that theme, I think the next point I'd love to get perspectives on, maybe I'll leave it to you, Sridhar and Dr. Vashisht, both of you, is something that's in the boardroom of it's a boardroom topic for a lot of pharmaceutical companies and hospitals, Ayushman Bharat. and the associated sort of, state government insurance schemes as well. We're sort of 6 years into Ayushman Bharat now. I think by all metrics covering and touching a very large part of India's population. Just tell us how is it impacting care delivery? What are you seeing on the ground in terms of, volumes of patients, choice of treatment? How are providers dealing with reimbursement? Would love to get sort of practical anecdotes of how you're seeing this impacting care.
I think this is some reality which we have to live with, because except in the metros, most of the other, even in metros, for example, Jaipur, we do 80% of government schemes, not just Renova, but any hospital brand you take in Jaipur, they do 80% government schemes. So now we have to, as healthcare providers, come up with models to make sure we get the viabilities through these schemes. So we have no other option. I think one of the methodology we follow is when we do our project reports, we go to places where most of the patients are from scheme. Then we try to see if the volumes are available. If the volumes are not available, then there's no point in investing in those cities. And then if the government is paying in time or not, the one is, these are subsidized rate, but thanks to oncology cases increasing day by day, that can be neutralized with volumes. But then if the government schemes are not paid in time, then that becomes a major problem.
Are you seeing a rush of volumes because of
yes
schemes?
Because rush of volume, definitely, because I think most of them who would not come forward to get treated are coming.
Got it.
But at the same time, we have to be a little diligent in terms of making sure the quality is maintained, because again, you have 20-25% set of patients who pay out of the pocket or insurance, and you're treating all of them under one platform. So that is one challenge I think we need to keep in mind.
Dr. Vashisht, anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of words. Is the scheme going to be around? Yes, very much so. Is it important? Yes, it's a game changer, because you're getting the haves-not, who probably did not have access to care, now into mainstream. Challenges are going to be ensuring that both the healthcare provider is honest about delivering the quality of care, which Dr. Sridhar spoke about, and also the people who deserve care are the ones who are getting it. It's not uncommon in a tier 2 city to see a person sitting in a Jaguar Land Rover walk in and take chemotherapy in Ayushman Bharat. So are we genuinely giving care to the ones who need versus the ones who want to have part of it? So I believe conceptually it's phenomenal. It's great that the country is proactively looking at creating health insurance for all. Are we there yet in terms of both delivering care and identifying whether we're delivering it to the right people? Probably not. That's work in progress.
And just one more question on this theme to either of you. As providers of care, how do you build in checks and balances to, sort of minimize unnecessary procedures, correct diagnosis? Are there sort of systems, processes that you've been able to build in?
I think it's very difficult in terms of, putting a particular system, because it all depends on, end of the day, what the consultant wants. See, as management, the only thing we can do is to make sure we take it to the consultant level or to the staff level that we are here to do quality work and ethical work. But then, because of the growing branch, being a growing branch, and the money being so much predominant with the consultants, so you keep models like there's a basic salary, and then you give them incentives, and all those things drive them to things which are not necessary. So we make sure that we don't give that kind of system where it is all performance driven. If you can mitigate that, 90% of the things are taken care.
And so it's a lot more focus on clinical outcomes rather than sort of the legacy incentive based structures. Got it.
So quick point, Ashish. I think there are two ways again to look at it. Partly from what he rightly mentioned is to not create an environment which is driven purely by finance for a consultant. That's extremely important. I think you need to give him that comfort of ensuring that it's best quality care rather than a number-driven practice. And B, also, I think it's very important to create EMRs which have inbuilt systems which can identify what is fallacious. For example, at MOC, we've been able to create an own indigenous EMR, which is a drop-down menu of therapeutic options. For example, if it's a breast cancer case and it's palliative, and if it's triple negative, there are these 9 chemotherapy options. If the doctor wants to enter the 10th one, it would ask you why. You can't save that option. And it will suggest, why don't you discuss this in the virtual tumor board? So building in indigenous processes in an EMR will, to some extent, ensure that there is somebody who's watching over your process and your outcome. And B, I think, as Dr. Sridhar very rightly mentioned, I believe we as doctors should ensure that there are no, kind of projects which are given or certain expectations which are given to a consultant when he's seeing a patient.
Got it. And Harriet, I don't know if you have sort of more of a global perspective here, but as we talk about these new personalized therapies, they're of course more effective, game-changing in efficacy, but they're also frightfully expensive to develop and to sort of administer. How are payers globally thinking about new modalities and the price versus benefit? Any learnings that might be sort of relevant for India?
Yeah, let me try. I mean, I would say the biggest shift we're seeing in access, and not oncology specifically, is the US. I mean, Europe continues to be in many markets, cost effectiveness. So, if you want to go to the UK, how many years of quality life do you get and what meets that threshold? And that continues. But where we see more of a shift has been the US. So historically, oncology has been a pretty protected class, and it still is relative to something like an immunology. But we are seeing more formulary exclusions. We are seeing more restrictions put on. So you have to have a prior authorization from your payer, or you have to go through other therapies first. And it is becoming a tougher environment. And what that means is the US, whereas oncology list prices are still increasing probably somewhere 3-4%, which is slower than it has been per year. The net prices, so what the manufacturer actually receives once all of the rebates and the negotiation is done, is now pretty flat. So we've seen that play through. We, on top of that, are now seeing the IRA come into effect. So this is the Inflation Reduction Act. So for Medicare patients, that's those over 65 in the US, their health coverage is provided through Medicare. And we've seen the first round of drugs where the pricing has been negotiated. And from an oncology perspective, Imbruvica was included. And when we looked at it, actually, Imbruvica had one of the largest discounts when you compared not to its list price, but to its effective net price in the market. And so oncology has been far from not included on that. And more broadly, we see US, again, consolidation of providers. So we're seeing fewer kind of sole operator oncologists and more oncology networks, which are then looking to provide more prescribed care pathways, as you mentioned. So it's not a case of, do whatever you want. There is more of a prescribed pathway, which is bringing people to a more common care. And we'll see how it evolves. Look, the election's going to be an interesting one. There has both parties have said there will be more restriction on drug pricing, whether it is an expansion of the IRA to more drugs, or Trump has even floated the potential of international reference pricing, which for the US, given the price differential between the US and even Europe, would be enormous.
Got it. But it's interesting that sort of a commonality that both you and Dr. Vishesh spoke about is just sort of the use of standardized protocols, procedures, etc., to also solve for selection. And I want to jump into now something that's actually quite close to, at least from an Eight Roads perspective, all of our hearts, which is just the role that digital health and technology is playing in transforming the way healthcare is delivered. And maybe I'd like to go across the panel in any order on your perspective on this. But do you see opportunities for technology to augment, disrupt, enable cancer care?
Absolutely, yes.
Yep.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, look, so I could talk at length about the research world and, AI-driven drug discovery, and that's exciting and it's cool and it's raising a lot of money. But what I think is making the most difference to patients today is the integration of AI and digital into patient care. Now, whether that means that your scan can be read using AI, even if there's not a radiologist where the scan's done, or your progression can be more accurately measured. Whether it means that your oncologist can make a smarter choice around your treatment. Can they take all of the markers, all of the data, and assess your risk stratification? How much chemotherapy do you need? And how much chemotherapy are you taking, which is going to give you all of the side effect profiles? I mean, in that one, the non sequitur becomes more important. As we see more patients living longer and longer with cancer, a side effect profile from chemotherapy that might have been okay 10 years ago is really problematic. And then also the telehealth thing has been huge. And that's not oncology specific, But if you can access your provider in a remote setting, for some patients, that is actually pretty valuable. So they may get their chemotherapy at an infusion center, but then they can talk to their oncologist through various telehealth channels.
Got it.
So I think
the
it's
first
like-
is really capacity augmentation. The second is more, targeting and precision, and the third is sort of convenience. Is that
It
how
ca-
you think about it?
Capacity, yes, but I mean, look, the data, when you look at reading these scans, actually, this is one of the ones where the computer often beats the human, right? If we're looking for small metastases, actually, sometimes it's better. It's not just a capacity piece.
Got it. And Dr. Vashisht and Sridhar, anything to add?
So I believe massive role. I think in all spectrums of oncology, digital health has a massive role. In diagnostics, as she mentioned, Dr. Harriet very rightly, in a country which has problems like ours, where manpower is actually at a premium, having chains and facilities where you can walk into a nearest center and you can have an expert radiation oncologist or a radio oncologist being able to diagnose a diagnosis of cancer correctly, understanding whether the disease is progressing or not correctly. Massive importance of tech there. In terms of therapeutics, right from precision oncology to liquid biopsies to CTCs to monitoring of therapy, as you mentioned, is this patient getting the right treatment, the right amount at the right time? Digital health has a massive role to play. Telemedicine, do we need to create even 5,000 square feet MOCs? Can we have a 800 square feet small taluka place, district cancer center, and have somebody who's remote controlling a process? Digital health has a massive role to play. In even economics, this makes so much sense when you can co-create a larger penetrative oncology experience without having to create the infrastructures of these ivory towers. Even in long-term monitoring in care, creating patient-based, patient-accessed models will ensure that you will end up giving lesser treatment to the ones who do not need and more treatment to the people who deserve if you digitalize healthcare record system. I think with ABA coming in India, I hope really it becomes prime time, because then the quality of digital reporting is going to significantly improve. So EMR in digital health is the way to go for oncology if it really wants to enter the bylanes of the community.
And this is an area where you feel the need for sort of dedicated specialization as well.
Absolutely. It's a partly unmet need.
Got it. Sridhar, please.
Totally agree with Dr. Vashisht. And just to add on, especially because there is so much of supply issue with cancer centers across India, tech will help. For example, some patient is coming from a very remote area. He comes to a medical oncologist, a protocol is fixed. Then he's not able to come back for the next 11 cycles. It helps, through technology helps to make sure that similar quality of care, which Dr. Vashisht mentioned in the beginning, that which doesn't happen in most of these nursing homes, at least can be improved to a large extent.
And my absolute last question before I open it up to the audience, and for context, a large part of the audience here comprises of either founders building solutions in healthcare and life sciences, or operators building businesses to serve the unmet need. What are opportunities that, and feel free for anyone and all of you to answer, but opportunities for founders building in India to tackle this 10 million incidents by 2030, where do you see sort of opportunities for businesses to be built?
At least 100 ones of them. You'll have to change your time clock if I start talking about each one of them. I believe the opportunity is right from diagnosing a cancer patient, ensuring he reaches a diagnostic center, getting a liquid biopsy done, ensuring that he meets the right cancer physician. You can digitalize processes, ensuring that the waiting time in somebody's OPD is lesser. Prem is smiling, I don't know why. Can we get the patient into the couch quicker? Can we make the oncologist who's currently, held up with his limited time more fruitful in making him see more patients? These are all unmet needs. Can you digitalize process in a way that the chemotherapy is given in the right way? Can you digitalize processes where surgical outcomes are monitored? Can you digitalize processes by which you can have a remote monitoring of patients who are coming from far and wide? So probably 100 unmet needs which people sitting here can solve.
I'm glad this is being recorded because I need a notepad to note this down. But we have 4 minutes on the clock. I do want to open it up to the audience to check for any questions for our panel.
Thank you for your interesting insights. This question is for Dr. Harriet. This is related to future of cancer care. 25 years back, when I used to work for, I advised some of the big pharmas. We used to work on the R&D portfolio of MABs and all. Those were seen to be cutting edge tools that will help increase the lifespan. But we were dealing more with the symptoms rather than really the cancer care. And one of the challenges that we used to face, especially in the US, was there were hardly any treatment naive patients. So for clinical trial, you had a patient who used to be on some cancer drug or the other. Given the rate of diagnosis that we are seeing here in India, obviously the way we are going will not have any treatment naive patient. So will we have any moment like we had for Hep C, where previously interferons were there and then you had some drugs coming in which cured Hep C? We get a magic pill or a magic bullet or magic injection or a magic vaccine where you just pause the cancer, or you do something where possibly the business models of Dr. Sridhar and Dr. Vashist gets disrupted.
Well, I would hate to disrupt the business model of my co-panelists, but I think the more we look at oncology, the less and less we see broad silver bullets, right? There are things which are effectively curative for small numbers of patients. People got very excited about the CAR Ts and they said, look, these are going to be curative. And what we've seen is, look, they're good, but we see significant numbers of patients relapse in that space. And so I suspect we will see small things which are curative for numbers of patients in terms of the therapeutics. To me, the biggest transformation, and this maybe ties into where I see opportunity in India, is this earlier diagnosis. If you can diagnose patients through liquid biopsy or other when they are stage 1 patients, then you really can cure them. If you can pick patients up that early. Now that requires us to think differently about diagnosis, but that is perhaps where I see the bigger disruption would be from earlier diagnosis versus treatment. And I guess the other almost curative bit things has been the cervical cancer vaccines. That's been the other one where we've just seen a huge shift, right? And so there are maybe a few other things we can hit like that, but my push would be on earlier diagnosis.
Thank you. And one more question. I think we have time for one more. Yeah, gentleman there.
So Harriet, you mentioned liquid biopsy twice in the last hour, and I was talking to somebody in the US and they said there are about 100 startups invested in the liquid biopsy space. And as you said correctly, most of them are in staging and in monitoring. What's the real challenge? Why is there no more outcome in screening and early diagnosis, as you said? And, I'm from the diagnostics background and I'm very heavily invested in trying to find out a solution for early diagnosis. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me share a couple of thoughts. And look, our latest estimate is the screening could be $100 billion global market. So, if we could capture it, it could dwarf the treatment selection and tracking. A number of things. So firstly, we used to have a lot of problems with the false positives. And you tell someone, oh, look, we think you might have cancer, but actually they didn't. And that was consumed potentially a lot of resources and was stressful. That has got a lot better. The latest tests are somewhere around 1% false positive rate. There is still a little bit in the precision of diagnosis. So these screening assays, the latest data from the NHS study, which is one they did in the UK with GRAIL of 140,000 patients, the assays say it's somewhere 85-90% of the time they can tell you the primary site. And that still means you're spinning up quite a lot of diagnostic work. But what I see the biggest barriers, and they're related, the first is just the cost. Even in the US, even with negotiation, these are $1,000, $1,500 cost for screening a patient. And that's challenging for a healthcare system to absorb because thankfully cancer remains reasonably rare. So most patients come back negative. So the cost, and that is where I think there's huge room for progress. And, in India as much as anywhere, how can we make that screening more cost effective? The second is related is inclusion in guidelines. So even in the US, it is not standard guidelines in many places to do the screening. And if we can bring the cost down and put this into standard guidelines, I think we could see a huge uptake. So that, in my perspective, is a lot of it is a cost problem.
Sanjay, if you don't mind, I'll have to pay a fine by the minute for every minute I'm late. So I know there are some questions. If it's okay, we could potentially take it with the panel offline. That is Dia. But Sridhar, Harriet, Dr. Vashish, thank you so much Really enjoyed the perspectives. Thank you so much.